Hello and welcome to another Writerly Witterings, and today it's hot out, so I'm drinking water. Cheers. Today I am very grateful indeed to Derwent and Cult Pens because they've sent me a nice little tool to evaluate. So let's have a look at it. Now, one thing I like to do when I'm out and about and I've got some spare time is I will take a paint book with me. I tend to just have blocks of watercolour paper that I can carry, and I will make sketches and consider views while I'm out and about, with a view to incorporating them into research for a book or doing some such similar. So I'll just do sketches wherever I go. I find as a writer it really helps if I'm trying to fix a particular scene in my mind. It is better to have a set of paints and a sketchbook and spend 10-15 minutes just making a very quick study, because then that fixes the scene in your mind much better than taking a quick snap with a camera or a phone, whatever it might be. Now, my standard device is this, which I made myself, as you can probably tell from the total lack of quality, but it's a very useful paint palette because it fits in a pocket and I can carry it around. But I made that a fairly heavy copper, which means it's usually a bit too cumbersome. So some time ago I bought this, a Winsor & Newton sketch palette. It has 6 little boxes where you can put paints. Delightful, very nice. Quite a simple, compact little device. Very plastic, but it's still a good practical device. However, I found that a metal one which has an area for mixing additional paints was more useful. So this has all of the 6 paints that were in here, but it's also got a couple of additional ones because it's a slightly more compact way of carrying things. And it's got 3 large mixing trays up at the top as well. So it's a convenient, good little kit. But then I saw this and I was quite intrigued. I'm going to talk a bit about it and the paints inside and show you a bit of what I've done. But I think this is really good. Now, first thing is, it has that sort of shiny aspect which to me usually spells rather cheap plastic that's going to break. However, this is not that kind of plastic, I don't think. First of all, it's got a nice metal hinge instead of just plastic lugs like the Winsor & Newton set had. So it gives me the feeling that it's going to be a bit more robust. When I open it, oh my word, this is well thought out. Let's just go through this. Okay, so we got paints, that's nice. We've also got 5 different mixing areas. For me, that's plenty. What it's also got, I'm going to leave that to one side for a second. What it's also got is this lovely little strip of, what do you call it? Not polystyrene, but foam rubber anyway. That allows you to dry your paintbrush when you need to, so you can get slightly better versions of paint. It's also got this. Now, this is a water brush. I have got lots of water brushes. I have a trio of cheap ones from Lidl's. I've got these, which are rather better ones made by, oh, I've forgotten who made them, Kuretake, that's right, which are considerably better. I've also got these, which are made by, I've got to check now, Pentel. And I've been using these for some time and I find these are about the best. I really like them. However, I have to admit, or I should just say, if you're wondering about this one, that's the one the dog found on the floor and started chewing. Blasted hound. This little device is easily the nicest water brush I've yet used. It seems to have particularly fine hairs, I think, but I don't know what the reason is, but this really does work much, much better whether I'm doing large-scale paintings or smaller ones. So, there we have a paint box. We have paints. What fun. I am not a brilliant artist by any stretch of imagination, but I thought it would be useful to do some simple studies just to see what paints actually did. Now, these are 3 paintings. This one is done with my standard set of watercolours, which I am pretty well used to, and I just thought it would be useful to give an indication what it looks like. And then I moved on to this one using a pot of water and ordinary paint brushes, and then this one using just the water brush that came with the set. This third interesting one I'll talk about in a minute. But first of all, let's just have a look at these paints that come in this paint palette. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 12 of them. They are very different in appearance compared to standard paints. And I'm going to see if I can demonstrate why by bringing this light down and just seeing if I can... Nope, I can't quite do it. Let me just say then that these paints are full of graphite. These paints were designed originally, I believe, as pencils, and it's only recently that Derwent have decided to release them as paints in blocks in a watercolor in a palette like this. The way that they were supplied originally, the Graphitint paints, was as pencils which were water soluble. So you'd paint with a crayon, wash it over it with some water, and then you would actually be able to move the paint around on the paper. I was thinking when I was looking at these the other day that they would be ideal for Christmas cards and things, but sadly I don't think they are, because when you don't have bright sunlight on them, the sparkles don't appear. Now, I painted these not in daylight. These were painted at night under a standard fluorescent bulb, so the change in appearance of each of these from my standard watercolour to these Graphitint paints really isn't representative of what they look like. However, I thought they were very interesting, and I went and did another painting with them just to have a look at some of the aspects I really liked. This is a good example. This was done with the simple water brush from the paint palette, just this thing, and it's using the Graphitint only paints, and it gives a wonderful effect, especially when you want to have a misty kind of effect. That really does come across beautifully, I think. But then trying to get detail with that paintbrush, it was very, very easy. It was really good fun to use and very, very effective. But I'm going to just come back, not just to talk about these, because at the same time as Cult Pens and Derwent sending me this to test and review, which I was very grateful for, I also bought a couple of water-soluble pencils from Derwent. This is one of them. This is the darker version, and I've been playing with it just a little bit. Here, for example, this is a view of a village just using ordinary watercolours. I was just trying to get a bit of a mood, and it summed up what I wanted to have, so that was nice. It gave me the feel of the direction of the road and things. Then I started playing with this pencil, and these are just simple studies. I was looking at characters on an Instagram shot, I think, And I just wanted to see how this water brush worked with these water-soluble pencils. And they're stunning. They're really, really good and delightful to use. Very, very effective. I went off and did something else too. And I just had a quick sketch of a village scene up the road here, which works quite well. It's, again, the sort of thing I wanted to see. But this, now I think you can see the graphite in this slightly better than I could show before. Let me just bring this up slightly. See if I can catch those perhaps you can see the sparkles there. It is really impressive how that Graphitint paint brings up this amazing sort of, I don't know how to describe it. It looks like tiny flakes of mica. And what you can then do is create your own effects by just using an ordinary eraser, because I assume the graphite that appears is very largely like pencils, so you can just rub it away and then you can get your own different effects after you've finished the painting. So for example, getting sunbeams coming down from a scene, or just changing the way that some aspects work. What I also did here was I used some of the Graphitint paints, but I also used some of the paints from my ordinary palette, which came up very well. Now, okay, is this something that will replace my ordinary palette, or will it replace my big palette? No, it won't replace that. That is constantly going to be out with me. And it's certainly the set of paints that I'll return to when I get indoors. May well replace this though. It depends on the type of day, it depends on the mood I'm trying to get with my painting, and it depends on a couple of other things. But I think these Graphitint paints are just so versatile and so interesting that I'm going to be using them an awful lot more. Why is this all being brought up now? Yes, why am I bringing it all up now? Well, simple fact is, while so many of us are still stuck at home, and we're going to be for quite some time from the look of things, when you're trying to journal, one thing that a lot of people will do is they'll do small sketches, cartoons, or doodles in the corner. It is much more interesting to do doodles with a watercolour set like this. It has everything you need on it, even down to the water brush, which is just, I think, fantastic. Really, really good. It's easily the best water brush I've used, and it's one I'm going to continue using. But it is an efficient, really effective little paint palette with some of the most interesting paints I've played with, and if you're not used to watercolouring, I think these paints will actually make it more interesting. It's something to use. You may have observed this little pot that is in here. Now, when I'm doing paintings outside, if I want to bring up people walking, if I want to show that there's sunlight, I'll paint a little bit of white over the top of the head, over the top of the shoulders. On a car, I'll pick up highlights on the roof line or something like that. And if you use ordinary white watercolour paint, it's not particularly good because it's transparent and so you can see everything behind it. This is magical stuff. It's called gouache. Here you go, Winsor & Newton gouache. Designer's gouache, in fact. Gouache. Amazing stuff, and it's almost like using an oil paint on top of your watercolour. So it just brings out a little bit of highlight. Nice thing is, you can mix it with other paints. So if you want a more yellowish sort of a top coat to someone's hair, you can give it a yellowish tint. You can do what you want with it really, but I find that's just something useful. And the great thing about this is that it fits in with the paint. Now, I've spoken about this to an extent. I've said a lot of things I like about it. I've mentioned one thing I don't really like is the type of plastic, because it looks like the sort that will degrade over time. However, I'm more than prepared to give it the benefit of the doubt. If there was anything I was going to criticise it for, it would be that they didn't increase the size just a little bit. They could have made it slightly longer so that you could leave the pen, the water brush, actually fitted. It doesn't fit in there by just about 3 millimeters when it's all in one thing. So you've got to take the water brush apart every time to pack it in. That seems a bit silly. Do I really care? No, I don't, because it is just so efficient. So, if you want to try out doing something during lockdown that's totally different, get onto the Derwent website. If you want to just do ordinary watercolours, they do have their own ink tents, I think they call them, watercolour blocks, which come in an identical paint palette. If you haven't tried watercolours before, these paint palettes are perfect. I really highly recommend them. And that's about that. If you enjoyed this, I'm glad. And you can demonstrate the fact by hitting the like button and sharing it and going to subscribe and hitting the bell so that you're told when I put a new video up. You can also go to my Patreon site and then support me and make it easier for me to buy things like the pencils and stuff so that I can do reviews. Other than that, thanks a lot for watching. Hope you really enjoyed that, and I'll speak to you soon. And for now, I'm going to go back to my glass of water and I'm going to consider what I'm going to do to try to mend my computer, which currently will not play any music and won't let me see any of my photos. I don't like computers, I think I've decided. Thanks a lot for watching. Take care. Cheers.